I'm from Dayton, Ohio, grew up there. I worked just down the road about 3 miles from where I grew up. And grew up on a fruit and vegetable farm, so I was around plants kind of all my life. My dad had a peach orchard, so I have just these real gut level memories of being up there in the peach orchard with blooms as far as I could see. And so there was a love of plants there from the beginning, and fields of strawberries that we help sell to the UPIC customers and things. But where I work now is a landscape design build company. There's about 30 employees there, mainly residential work. And for the last probably 20 years, actually, 15, 20 years, I've been the main designer there. That's where I'm at now. I always liked to draw. That was the thing I did like. I had doodled in my school books and just always was kind of playing around with learning how to draw. But I never hardly even knew there was a connection between, or that there was a career that connected plants with drawing. You know, I thought drawing was just kind of something maybe artists would do, that would just paint pictures for on the wall or something. And I like to draw horses and cars and people's faces, that kind of thing. Well then, when I was 12 or 13, 10, 11, 12 years old, I was working after school to make some money at an egg ranch, gathering eggs and then taking out dead chickens and then working on an egg grading machine. And that actually ended up being kind of stressful, working on that egg grater where the eggs would pile up, and if I slowed down, and I'm kind of slow anyhow, if I slowed down, the eggs would start to hit the floor. And so then when one of my friends said he was working at a landscape company and they told me how much he was making an hour and he got a raise in the first month, I thought, well, that sounds good, I'll try that. And so I did. I was 14 years old, and they hired me to just work in the nursery. Pruning suckers off of crabapple trees and pulling weeds and cleaning up plants that get ready to go out for the landscape job. And as I did that, I started to notice which plants were called what, you know, what the names were, and noticed features about these spirea, and that if you cut back the spirea, they would bush out again and make a nice fresh new plant. And I started just making connections between the names on the plant labels and what these plants look like. And so a database began to develop in here. And then my employer, he knew I liked to draw. So it was kind of his initiative to start involving me on when they'd go out to measure a site, measure around a new design, a house. They'd take me along and I'd hold one end of the tape measure and mark down dimensions, and then sometimes I'd go back in the office then and watch as the other guy would lay it out to scale, and he showed me how to do that. And then I also started working on the landscape crew, installing paving and walls and planting things and landscape maintenance. So I kind of learned firsthand what all goes into it. But I would always sit there like at lunch when I worked in the nursery, and sometimes there'd be these landscape plans laying around. I'd just pick them up and look at them and just kind of drool. It'd be like, man, I'd love to be able to be drawing this stuff. It looks so neat. And we had a really good artist, designer working there that was doing it. And I just pore over these prints and just kind of memorize them and how his writing looked and how he drew these symbols, and it just really attracted me. And then bit by bit, they started working me into that role, and eventually that's where I've been all the while. So it's kind of full-time now. And then he moved on to, he does illustration and architectural renderings as his own business, and so that put me kind of in the main seat as the designer. some things I really try for in the design is to make the landscape and the outdoor living area feel like it was original with the house, like this was done by, make it feel like there was a really neat architect that designed this house and he included the whole package. He built this patio and these walls to really blend with the house originally, instead of it feeling like there was a landscaper that needed a job and he threw up these walls and put whatever plants he had in inventory. I try to, with the goal of making it really blend with the architecture of the house. And then have the plants I look for shapes and textures that really complement the architecture. One thing, Lloyd Fulmer, my employer, he gained from Europe is the idea that, well, he said here in America, we kind of let the plants boss us around. And he said over there, where they've had these horticultural practices for hundreds of years where they'll boss the plant around and tell it where to, train plants into special shapes and fit them in tight places, and with pruning, mainly pruning techniques, keep a plant for years and years and years small or trained up against the wall or trained into a hedge, take a big tree and make it just a hedge out of it. And so we've tried to bring some of that into our designs too, with the pleaching and pollarding and things like that. That run-of-the-mill landscape companies that are just kind of grown into it from mowing and pruning or something, they're not really thinking along those lines as much. I don't sit around thinking a lot of times, should I have went to college for that or should I not? I'm too busy to really think about that. So in so many ways, I guess what I've heard from my employers is there was a time when they hired a couple landscape architects who had been through the schooling. And it could have been the individuals they were dealing with. They found them very difficult to work with. They already had their mind made up, and it didn't work very well in the setting where they were. So it worked real good for them to get a guy like me that had no idea what I was doing.
And that's what
and they just kind of were able to kind of shape me as I grew in that way.
Well,
and yet I've still been learning too. It's not like I keep my eyes shut. I keep my eyes open and do a lot of reading and learning, but not as much in a formal setting. God moves in mysterious ways.
Right.
Yeah, because like I said, I never really even knew there was such a thing as a landscape designer when I was a kid. I didn't even know that job existed.
Right.
But it's really been, I can't imagine a job I would enjoy more, because I love to draw and I've come to really enjoy plants. And so I'm always just noticing stuff, what's growing here, and hey, what's that? I've never seen that before. What is that? And just keeping my eyes open all the time is what I've been taught to do really by my employer. Just riding along with him, he would always point stuff out. Look at that. Why is that tree doing that? And so I've had good on-the-job mentors, really. That's been so good for me.